guys, it's Jerningam here. We're going to take a look at Iran's missile testing.
Independence Day offer is back. Buy 3 plots and get 1 free at our flagship developer.
A day of national pride for Iran. The unveiling of its own long-range surface-to-air missile defense system, the Bavar 373. After years of sanctions that stopped Iran from importing many weapons, it's had to develop its own domestic arms industry. And now facing a military buildup in the region, President Hassan Rouhani is defiant.
Now that our enemies do not accept logic, we cannot respond with logic. When the enemy launches a missile against us, we cannot give a speech and say, Mr. Rocket, please do not hit our country and our innocent people. We cannot say, Mr. Rocket Launcher, please hit a button and self-destruct the missile in the air.
The Bavar 373 can identify up to 100 targets at the same time. Iran's ballistic missile program was not part of the 2015 nuclear deal, a reason cited by the United States for pulling out of the agreement last year and imposing sanctions on Iran. The recent seizing of oil tankers, an Iranian vessel detained in the British overseas territory of Gibraltar, and a UK-flagged tanker detained by Iran in the Gulf has raised tensions further. Now the US has put together a naval coalition it says is to protect the freedom of navigation through the Gulf's strategic Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil passes through, a narrow stretch of water that Iran and Oman share territorial rights to.
Without Iran, there would not be any security in the region. Iran is a superpower ready to provide security for the region, Persian Gulf, and Strait of Hormuz. Stop pressuring us and stop encouraging your friends to be hostile towards us. We're ready for friendship and defense, as we are ready to fight back any invasion.
The Iranian tanker Grace 1, now renamed Adrian Darya, was released on orders of the Gibraltar's Supreme Court and is now heading to Greece. Iran, however, is still holding the British tanker in the Strait of Hormuz.
The British flag Stena Impero was seized by the Revolutionary Guard last month for what they say were violations of international maritime regulations. They say the vessel had changed directions in the shipping lanes and collided with a fishing boat, but also turned off these tracking systems to avoid Iranian forces. Now, Iran says the seizure and release of this vessel has nothing to do with the Iranian vessel that was seized by British Royal Marines off the coast of Gibraltar, although a foreign ministry spokesman said a few days ago that he hoped that the issue would be in front of the court and that the ship would be released very soon.
Australia, Britain and Bahrain have joined the US coalition. But on the seas here, it's Iran that still feels it holds the strategic advantage in any potential conflict. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera, Bandar Abbas, Iran.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, let's have a look at the next news I'm going about. Under the Exploring River.
After 14 years in complete darkness, the wreckage of the ill-fated Titanic is in the spotlight again, after a wealthy undersea explorer captured new video of the massive and once thought unsinkable steamship.
It is a big wreck. I wasn't fully ready for just how large it was. And when it came up on sonar, it really stood out.
Private equity investor Victor Vescovo led a mission more than 12,000 feet deep to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, about 400 miles from Newfoundland, with a submersible vehicle that took more than 3 years to build.
Pretty different world under the sea. Titanic ship there, guys, rusting there, but
future 3D models of the Titanic for augmented reality and virtual reality platforms. The images may also help scientists predict how the wreck will continue to deteriorate. But despite its state of decay, researchers say it continues to impress.
It was just extraordinary just to see it all. And the most amazing moment came when I was going along the side of the Titanic, and the bright lights of the submersible, the first time when they reflected off of a portal, it came right back. It was like the ship was winking at me.
In 1912, 2 days after it set sail from England with more than 2,000 people on board, the Titanic struck an iceberg. Over 1,500 people died when it disappeared into the Atlantic Ocean. And now, after 100 years, these striking images are helping keep the memory of that disaster alive.
and that is a bit of a tragedy when that happened with the Titanic when it sunk. I mean, there's a film of it as well. Look. Okay, Let's have a look what this says here. And 25-year-old man has been arrested after suspicion of murdering Hull necessary student, Library Square. So there's a murder happened in England where the students got killed by a man, I think. Okay, so we got the 21-year-old Van Shield vanished in February this year, leading to searches which involved hooded hundreds of police officers. A member of the public family. Just a minute, I'll read this to you as well, guys. Damn it, I just missed what I was going to say then. Right, 2 minutes. Okay, so after being missing for near enough 7 weeks, the student's body was found and recovered. I mean, it's the world we're living in today, guys, is just terrible. From the Harborside police, and the man had been suspicion of murder, who was originally from High, whatever that means. I'm trying to read all the words to you, but when anybody hears about crimes of somebody getting killed or murdered, it's, you know, not everybody likes that. People like to live in the world what's peaceful, nice, with nice people in, and that's bad.
Head of News and Current Affairs at Channel 4 has called Boris Johnson a known liar who is copying Putin's approach to the media and says it's the responsibility of broadcasters to challenge politicians when they're not being truthful. Dorothy Byrne made the comments during the McTaggart lecture at the Edinburgh Television Festival.
What do we do when a known liar becomes our Prime Minister? I've talked to journalists from several news organisations about this issue. They said they would be loath to use that word, liar. Is it time for us to start using the L word? I believe that we need to start calling politicians out as liars.
This is
when
Edinburgh
they lie.
Television Festival,
if
yeah.
we continue
Scotland.
to be so polite, how will our
We're talking about
viewers
Boris
know
Johnson,
that
yeah.
politicians are lying?
Dorothy Byrne joins us now from Edinburgh. Hello to you, Dorothy. It's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this afternoon.
Hello.
What did you hope to achieve with that attack on Boris Johnson last night?
I think we do need to think as journalists, particularly television and radio journalists, what we're going to do if politicians don't tell the truth. Because we're British, we're very polite about it, and we use words like strange or say, oh, perhaps that is not quite the case. But in these times, I think we need to be clearer with our viewers when politicians are not telling the truth. Because, as I said, otherwise, how will the viewers know that the truth is not being told? But I also think that we need to give a lot more detail to our viewers about policies that we are examining. Traditionally, I think we've all put detailed fact checking on our websites, and I think that we need to actually put more of those fact checking details into our broadcast reports to help our viewers judge for themselves. One of the points that I made was it's impossible for viewers themselves to tell whether something is true or not. We actually did a survey of 1,700 people. We gave them 6 stories, 3 were true and 3 were false. And only 4% of people could tell which was which. That shocked me, but then I realised, well, why should they know? Because they've all got jobs to do, homes to run, and they rely on us to do the fact-checking for them.
Was there anything specifically that you were thinking about when you'd written that speech? I mean, we know that Boris Johnson has lied. He was sacked for lying with his column that he wrote in a national newspaper previously. It's an actual fact that he has lied. But I wonder why you specifically brought it up. For what purpose were you hoping to achieve that?
I think one of the things that concerns us all as journalists and voters is that we look across the Atlantic Ocean at the United States, where it has become accepted that Donald Trump's lies as a matter of course. The Washington Post actually counted 10,000 lies, and some of his lies are simply stupid. For example, he said that his father was born in Germany. He said that the sound of windmills gives you cancer. So my concern is that we should not become like the United States, where truth is no longer regarded as something of primary importance. We must, both as journalists and as voters, say that a belief in the central importance of truth is vital for democracy.
Yeah, I mean, we've become a massively divided nation, haven't we, Dorothy? And that's not least because of what's happened with Brexit and the fact that Boris Johnson flip-flopped on that before he decided which side he wanted to take. You certainly acknowledged that in your speech, but I don't know, inflammatory language like liar, suggesting that our Prime Minister is a liar, does that not divide our country still further?
I think it's not that L word isn't a word that I would bandy about, but I think when we are divided, the one thing that we must unite on is the central importance of truth. You know, in the US, it has started to be that a number of political figures have said that each person's truth is just a matter of their own opinion. There is no such thing as truth. And if you think something's true, then it's true. And what I'm saying is we mustn't go down that road. And so this is, I suppose, in many ways, a warning to politicians that you've got to tell the truth. And if you don't, we will call you out. So keep your own house in order. It's not about me being against any individual politician. I have huge respect for politicians. I think it's remarkable that people go into public life and undergo such unpleasantness as happens in political life now. So I'm not against politicians, I'm for truth.
We have to be, our side of the bargain is that we have to be independent broadcasters. You know, that's what we have to be if we want our politicians to uphold their end of the bargain. You know, and I have to put this to you. One of your execs liked an abusive tweet about Boris Johnson on Twitter. And one of your presenters has not been particularly impartial about the Tories. I'm guessing that's what they would come back at you with if they were here standing where I am today.
Well, I think your point about the Tories is an allegation that has never, that one person made on Twitter. That was never proved. Nobody should like a rude remark about anybody, and we must be absolutely duly impartial. If anybody who works for me is not duly impartial, I can tell you they get into trouble. So we have regulators to whom people make complaints, and you'll know, Kate, they really do make complaints, and they will hold us to account if we're not duly impartial. I completely agree with you that we have to be fair and equal about talking about British politics.
Yeah. Lots to talk to you about. I hope you've got a few more minutes to spend with us. I know you've been in the business.
Certainly.
We've been in the business a long time. Not our paths have necessarily crossed, but we started at Granada around about the same time. You said this about Boris yesterday. I just want to play it to our viewers, and then I want to ask you about it. Boris Johnson, this is what Dorothy said yesterday.
But the most challenging question of all came last. Who is your favourite politician? He said, Pericles, oh, you man of the people. You couldn't resist showing off your lovely classical education at Eton and Oxford. What will it be next time? What's your favourite colour? When will you bring world peace? Do you have any personal morality at all? Oh, I think that last one, sorry, was a real question. I couldn't help myself.
Dorothy, you've railed against white posh boys in the newsroom all your working life. Do you think that Boris sort of fits in with that mould, and that's why you don't particularly like the Prime Minister?
I don't say whether I like him or I dislike him. Actually, last night I also said that many people say that we should be against men who are pale, male and stale, and that I was completely opposed to that view because I think that although white men, middle class, may be overrepresented, they are still an absolutely vital voice to hear. But there is a problem, which is that well-off men who went to private schools and Oxford and Cambridge still dominate in our industry. You're not like that, Kay. I'm not like that. And a key point I made was that when you change who is making TV, you change what is on TV. So I think that both our politicians and television and newspaper journalists do and have come from a very narrow group, and we've got to widen that out. I think it's clear that a lot of journalists and politicians did not foresee Brexit, and I think that is probably because they were cut off from the areas that you and I come from, Kay, where we probably had more idea that the rest of the British population wasn't thinking like that metropolitan elite.
He wants to cut us out, and I'm guessing other politicians will want to do the same sort of things by embracing Facebook Lives and basically circumventing broadcasters. Should broadcasters like us, like you, like the other major broadcasters, acknowledge that the delivery of news is changing, or should we just ignore him on Facebook? That doesn't really make him Putin-esque, does it, just because he's embracing another form of social media?
I think it's great that he's embracing another form of social media, and at Channel 4 News, and I know at Sky, digital news is incredibly important to us, and it's a fantastic way of reaching young people. But it's not instead of us. So when I last checked last night, 192,000 people had watched his Facebook Q&A, but the last BBC debate was watched by 5 million people. So the first thing that you've got is you're reaching far more people. 75% of people in this country depend on television news as their main source of news. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that under regulation, we have to be duly impartial, fair and accurate. And the problem with Boris Johnson doing something on Facebook Live is that's completely unregulated. Also, of course, they choose who will take, which questions they will take, and there are no follow-ups to those questions. Now, I know that if you were interviewing Boris Johnson and you were interviewing him at length, you're an informed journalist, you'd have been up all night the night before, really prepping to make sure you knew all the facts, and then you could really scrutinise what Boris Johnson had said. Yes, give him a proper time to explain it. I'm against interrupting politicians too much, but he has to explain it, you scrutinise it, he justifies it, and then the public can make up their minds for themselves what they think. If you just throw out an odd question to a politician and he gets to give whatever answer he wants.
2 minutes, guys. I just need to get myself a glass of water and we carry on filming the video of this. Possible, yeah. Possible. Right. I'm back. Got myself a Iron Brew drink. Iron Brew. The Iron Brew. I was dying of thirst. Anyway, back to the video. Pardon me.
Without anybody saying, hang on a minute, is that true? I don't think that that's really helping the public. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it. I'm saying it is in no way a substitute for proper journalism of the type, may I say, you are famous for.
Well, some broadcasters certainly have their nose put out of joint because he wouldn't take part in the debates quite recently, me amongst them. How do we persuade politicians, election just around the corner, how do we persuade them to come to the table this time?
Well, one of the things that I did last night was give them the facts that 75% of people in this country use television news as their main form of news. That is extraordinary reach. And also, 71% of the population trust television news, whereas, and this was a proper Reuters Institute survey, only 22% of the population trusts internet news and 10% of the population trusts news on social. So if politicians want the message they give to be trusted, there is in fact no better place for them to do that than on TV, where they get the reach and there is the basic trust of the viewers. And I think also we have to embarrass them. And last night I pointed out that Margaret Thatcher did this. Margaret Thatcher regularly put herself up for 30-minute interviews, 45-minute interviews. They were very tough interviews. I never heard anybody say Margaret Thatcher refused to be interviewed. But we have two political leaders now who are simply not being interviewed. And I think partly I have to just say that isn't right. The fact that we have a Prime Minister who has not given a single major press conference or a single significant interview since he became our Prime Minister, that is worrying. And again, I look across the ocean, and what do I see? I see a president who's has abandoned the famous White House briefings and instead says that if you, as a journalist, want to interview him, you have to throw questions at him as he's out and about. And I don't know if your viewers will have noticed this, but that's what's been happening since Boris Johnson became our Prime Minister. He hasn't done major sit-down interviews, but instead he's doing little bits of throw me some questions while he's out and about. And because I must be equal about this, Jeremy Corbyn similarly does not hold himself to account, does not do regular long interviews of the type that leaders in the past did. And indeed, with him, sometimes we're only allowed one question. And in the case of Channel 4, when we only got one question one day, he actually didn't answer the one question we got. So how can we know what the policies of these politicians really are and whether they cut the mustard if we don't get to see them being properly questioned? Yeah. And I'm not speaking on behalf of us as journalists, but it's for the voters and for our democracy. We need to pressurise them to sit down and talk to us.
Okay, I guess number 10 would say that he's sitting down with all the major broadcasters at the G7 this weekend, if they were here to answer that.
Very interesting news, eh? I feel like I'm going around in a circle with this Brexit, and I think most people do as well. And the Not, I don't think many, but most people know where we're going. It's going to be like last time or the time before. There's still more violence in Yemen. Just trying to find some more news I can actually show. I may just leave it at this for this video, guys. Well, thank you for joining me in this video, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe like you always do. I always appreciate you guys watching my videos, giving me some feedback and liking, commenting, subscribing. Catch you in the next stream. I'll be doing a game later of probably Sniper Elite 2 remastered on PS4. Was PS3 game, but yeah. Anyway, guys, see you in the next one. Thank you for joining me. Peace. See you there, guys. Peace.